Story 1. Many people do not realize how much structure the military provides until it is gone. After leaving, you have to rebuild your routine, standards, and sense of pace. Another major difference is that civilian workplaces tend to avoid direct communication compared with the directness common in the military. Story 2. You'll miss the clowns but not the circus. Also, the benefits are incredible. Story 3. How much travel changes your view of the world. They certainly couldn't keep me down on the farm after I'd seen Paris. Story 4. You meet and make friends with people you might not have interacted with before you joined. Together, you have some of the greatest times of your life. Then one day it is over. Story 5. The hard stuff is where all the good memories come from. Story 6. Punctuality was the norm. I have been out for about 30 years and still arrive 10 to 15 minutes early for every event. The place where I work now is run by retired veterans. People who routinely arrive late do not last long here. Story 7. I should have taken better care of myself, and now I have to deal with the consequences. I skipped many medical appointments to stay on mission. It is much harder to get that time off once you are out, and at the end of the day, I was just a cog in the machine that has since been replaced. Story 8. Healthcare access strongly affects the rest of my country. As a veteran, I get access to social programs and a reasonable level of healthcare. All I have to do is show up and ask. This gives me a level of freedom most American civilians cannot achieve or understand. If I hate my job, I find another one. It never crosses my mind to worry about getting sick. This seriously surprises most American civilians. I care about what I am doing and who I am doing it with. I compromised my morals for W at one point. At that time, I cared about the people I worked with. I am not doing it again. During my time in service, I cared about my career. Most jobs since then have been terrible. The people are a joke and their products and services are toxic. Story 9. Many people do not realize how good the pay and benefits are. Working a civilian job is hard and pays little. Military training and details were easy. Deployments were difficult, but overall the military was the easiest job I have had. Story 10. Reading these comments, it sounds like I am the odd man out. My 4-year enlistment helped me grow up, travel the world, and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I did not peak in the military, not by a mile. I still have close friends I served with, and I have some good memories of unique experiences. Civilian life and freedom are much better. I do not have people telling me how to do my job or taking credit for my work. The biggest realization I had after getting out was how much the military meant to some veterans more than it meant to me. I was so sick of my life being micromanaged and of working under, with, and over incompetent people. I was happy to get out and start my real life. Story 11. The times I now laugh about and reminisce over were truly awful at the time. Story 12. The military shelters us from the real America, particularly when one joins at 18. Sure, I was a poor kid and saw some things growing up. I enlisted at 18 to get away from that and made a better life for myself. However, it was not until I retired from the military that I fully realized just how messed up many citizens are. It was an awakening, and for a long time I felt disappointed and lied to. People I served with hid their true feelings about some matters. That was a kick in the nuts for me. I suppose that's life though. A whole lot of messed up mixed with some really good things. Story 13. I did not realize until later how the smaller changes made a bigger impact. As others said, I arrive 5 to 10 minutes early for everything. Everything has a place, so I can find almost anything in the dark. When I need to decide on the fly, I choose and move forward without second guessing. Story 14. How much I would come to appreciate my time there with noble people. I finished my 4-year enlistment in 1971 during the Vietnam War. I was young and definitely not in favor of the United States involvement, nor of the scumbag politicians who led us into and kept us in the war. Story 15. When I retired, I realized the work schedules continued. They simply assigned someone else to the slot. The same happened with additional duties. They were passed on to 5 different people. Maybe I should not have worked so hard. Story 16. How many successful soldiers learn to compartmentalize everything? All the things they were raised to believe were immoral and unforgivable can become routine. If you saw someone die in a horribly cartoonish way, you joke about it with your buddies and then call your wife to see how her day went. You separate that part of your identity from the rest of yourself, and it is not a problem. Until you get out and the walls of those compartmentalized parts of your mind start to come down, and the reality of who you are and what you have done comes crashing into who you thought you were. Easy fix, just talk to someone, right? Therapy helps, but it can be hard to find someone who understands those kinds of experiences. The isolation can be real. Story 17. I loved the thick smell of gunpowder that hung in the air at the range on a cold autumn morning. We were loading ammunition as the sun came up, drinking terrible black field coffee and making jokes with everyone. Felt very peaceful. Story 18. They still can't figure out how to stop promoting good old boy dirtbags. The people who rattle the cages don't rise in rank. They leave before they have to sell out. Story 19. The deliberate use of operant and classical conditioning in basic and combat training hones the fight, flight, freeze response into only fight. Burhus, Frederick Skinner, and Ivan Pavlov work well when one is being shot at, but not when one is cut off in traffic. Story 20. As an autistic veteran, it was the structure. You knew for a fact everywhere you had to go, when you had to be there, what you were going to do, and who you had to talk to. There was no guesswork. Yes, your chances of being blown up were marginally higher than in the civilian world, but that was the risk you took. Story 21. I find civilian life much more difficult than military life. The friends I made there were the best I ever had. We shared a common purpose and looked out for each other. You do not find that as easily in civilian life except in some jobs like the police, and even then it is different and not as close-knit. Story 22. Random thoughts. Prepared and educated me for success far more than I realized. I was able to build a second career from it separate from my degree. It is easy to see the comedy and absurdity, catch-22s, fumblings, and flexible practices while you are in, and assume they are just armyisms or subcultural things that are probably absent in the civilian world. But in many civilian industries, it is actually worse. You also realize some of the training and decision-making frameworks you received were really excellent, highly transferable, and often lacking in civilian leadership and institutions. Think about it. The Army has much more institutional research, process development, history, and doctrine than a random civilian company that someone started 10 to 30 years ago. You sometimes wish you could have your old, dysfunctional team back instead of the random civilian one you joined. It is a lot more fun to play stupid games when you are wearing a uniform and with friends. Civilian politicking and ladder climbing has the same stupidity but none of the camaraderie or sense of a story bigger than yourself. It was easier to be honest in the military than in civilian jobs. Respect is mandatory, but honesty is valued. The bravery it takes is admired if you present it the right way. In civilian jobs, your position can be at risk if you point out the elephant in the room, no matter how long you build up to it, how tactful you are, or how soft your presentation is. Honesty is a thinner line to walk in civilian life. Service members have thicker skin than civilians. The military is honestly a more developmental atmosphere than civilian life at every level. There are exceptions to all of that, and your mileage may vary, but that has been my experience. Story 23. Since my time in the Marine Corps, I wake up early, arrive early for appointments, continue to train with firearms, and am deeply grateful for the Servicemen's Readjustment Act. The heat no longer bothered me after one summer on Paris Island and serving as one of the few Marines deployed to the Panama Canal Zone. Story 24. I thought my Marines were intellectually challenged, and then I began working with civilians. Story 25. Think about how traumatizing it is for your children to have to leave their friends every 4 years. They never truly get close to anyone. Story 26. How little the phrase "thank you for your service" actually means. It is an empty platitude. I fucking hate hearing it. Story 27. It is remarkably sophisticated in training. Each year it loses about a third of its junior enlisted personnel and junior officers as contracts expire. I cannot imagine a Fortune 500 corporation trying to manage that level of turnover. Meanwhile, those who remain in service must be trained continuously to move up and assume more senior positions as long-term service members retire. This is only the schoolhouse side, from a private's advanced individual training to a colonel's war college. Unit training is another matter. Story 28. The convenience of never wondering or worrying about what clothes to wear to work. Story 29. Under previous administrations, I observed that select members of the media were given access to classified and sensitive information in a very controlled manner for reports and articles. Everything they recorded or wrote was vetted by a security officer, and their stories were reviewed before publication. Also, the vast majority of military personnel have little knowledge of the broader mission. The technician who just fixed a jet often does not know the mission it just completed or what it will do next. Most service members perform a single, specific job or role, and it ends there. Story 30. After completing the 4 years of active service you initially signed up for and receiving your discharge, you remain in the inactive reserve or the individual ready reserve for an additional 4 years. During that period, you can be called back to active duty if needed, and such a recall would occur before a draft is implemented during a declared war or national emergency. Story 31. The interpersonal skills needed in the military for social survival are excellent. I learned to use conflict avoidance, conflict reduction, and conflict resolution to get work done while functioning in a very large group. Some of these skills have been helpful in civilian life. I do not yell the same way as my civilian peers. I use a low, serious tone instead of loud yelling, which seems to elicit stronger responses. Story 32. What you wished you had then, you probably have now. What you want to go back and fix, you simply cannot. Life goes on for some people, but service before self makes everything worth it. Keep your chin up. Keep your head on a swivel. Go crush life. Story 33. Your retirement benefit is based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers. So when many prices rise, they say, don't worry about that other stuff. Based on our calculations of what they consider relevant, it only increased to 8%. Then they say, since you are covered by TRICARE for life now and must pay Medicare premiums every month, to continue providing service we will increase those monthly premiums by more than the monthly cost of living adjustment you received. So you will actually receive fewer dollars per month even though inflation occurred. Invest as much as you can throughout your career, however long it is. Story 34. I agree with the positives in this thread. Some of the best times of my life, socialist benefits and structure. Some of the negatives, glory and honor are not real. Only life and death are. You and your friends do not die with honor or sacrifice. You just die like everyone else. The rest is just marketing. The military safety culture is also an unfair blame culture for junior personnel. A lot of it is just hazing and marketing psychology. Your branch, unit, or designator is a brand like any sports team, fast food restaurant, or corporation. It only helps the military if individuals enmesh and sacrifice their identities to that brand. It hurts the individual, and it is the reason a lot of companies do not want to hire veterans. They cannot think critically. Officers are not smarter or more responsible. Some are mentally incompetent or are psychopaths. The college degree requirement is wildly outdated. Civilians do not care about you, and most think you are a sucker. They are jealous of the benefits, though. Story 35. The military lives in a bubble of socialism without realizing it. Guaranteed job if you do not commit a serious crime. Universal basic income. Free housing or housing allowance. Clothing allowance for uniforms. Free meals or meal allowance. Free education as long as you pass your courses. Free and unlimited health care. Free legal counsel. Job opportunities for family members. Discounted groceries and merchandise. Free flights globally. Access to a variety of other programs that you only need to sign up for. Most members do not realize this and think they are living as capitalists and identify as Republicans or Democrats. Story 36. How unusual it is to have several friends die at a young age. Story 37. In Vietnam, I learned that some skinny little wimp could be the toughest, bravest badass that ever walked the earth. Story 38. I miss certain people more than I expected. I wish I had taken more pictures and reached out to some friends when I served in the military. Serving gave me a greater appreciation for the people I still have in my life and gratitude for how far I have come since leaving the United States Army. I wish there were people I could still share that progress with or update about my life. I underestimated how much post-traumatic stress disorder would take from my friendships. It feels like it has stolen generations of friendship, connection, future plans, and love for my life and from the wider community. Story 39. Nothing will ever be the same for you. Your entire worldview, mannerisms, outlook, mental health, speech, physical health, personality, and place in the world will be different. The person you were dies somewhere during the first enlistment contract, and an entirely new person emerges. That person may look like you and have your memories, but they are not the same person you were. You still carry what you used to be, but you are not that person anymore. No, this is not always a good thing. Story 40. One thing I have heard a lot from military friends is that no one actually wants to hire veterans. Story 41. A lot of your closest friends there are friends by circumstance. Most will not talk to you again once you transfer to another unit. Some will drop you a couple of weeks later. Of the hundreds of people I knew, and the dozens I was very close to, I still only talk to a single person 7 years later. Jokes about death are normalized in the military. Civilians look at you as if they are about to call the police for a welfare check when you say you want to lick the front bumper of a moving semi-truck. Story 42. Your body will remind you every morning that you once slept on rocks, dirt, and a rucksack as if it were a luxury mattress. Story 43. I found out 30 years later that injuries come back to haunt you. Story 44. I did not take enough pictures. I should have taken more risks. I took people's professionalism for granted, such as being on time, following rules, and getting results. The civilian world is full of people who are soft, weak, and easily offended, often late or calling in sick, and who give many excuses for why they cannot accomplish tasks. Story 45. Looking back 20 years later, you might realize that claims of weapons of mass destruction, defending democracy, fighting for freedoms, and so on are bullshit. It is all about defending corporate interests. Story 46. How many people simply do not know how to react when you say you were in the military? Can be incredibly isolating. I have had to avoid discussing my past outright so people can get to know me a little first, and then I share it. When I first got out, it felt that way except around other veterans. Story 47. It's a shame that playfully acting gay with your coworkers is not widely accepted in corporate America. Gay Chicken is one of my favorite games for camaraderie. Story 48. I have significant hearing loss and constant loud ringing in my ears. The government gives me $100 a month for the ringing, but my hearing loss at discharge was not considered service-related. Story 49. Working 14-hour days every day for $35,000 a year is not a good deal. At least the veterans' benefits are good. I laughed out loud. I now work as a firefighter, working half as many hours for almost triple the pay. That first paycheck from the fire department was eye-opening for me. Story 50. The military displays many of the red flags of an abusive relationship, and I was not going crazy so much as reacting poorly to the undiagnosed mental illnesses of my superiors, who in turn were also being abused and taken advantage of. However, I was also struggling mentally. It took a few years to learn how to be a real person again. Story 51. I was living a socialist dream. I find it strange how many veterans are opposed to socialism but fondly recall their time in the military. Story 52. It felt like an advanced prison. Every military veteran will tell you that in the military the way we speak is like a ball and chain. How much longer you got? Story 53. It was great not to punch a clock. On deployment, you may have months of 17-hour days. On shore duty, there were many days with little to do. You might complete everything by noon and be allowed to go home. When I was commanding officer, I would say that if you have nothing to do not do it here. Working as a contractor and being required to track my hours blew my mind. Story 54. It's a completely separate culture from regional American civilian culture. You can be direct and tell people when they are out of line, wrong, messing up, doing a bad job, or acting foolish, and people do not treat you like the bad guy for pointing it out. You can also tell people you appreciate their work, that they are doing a good job, or thank them for helping you without anyone getting awkward. Often it is the same person you criticized the day before. I was able to shut down hardcore evangelicals in the workplace, even one who outranked me, for bringing religion into work and pushing it on others, and the rules protected me. I used to not get the crazy veteran stereotype, but after I describe how the military operates or what the government does and people do not believe me despite my 17 years of experience, I understand it now. Story 55. The military consumes far more of your time than you realize. After years in the service, you get used to it. When I retired, my phone became completely silent and I was no longer worried about physical training sessions or 1,000 emails a day. It then hit me that I had been spending 15 or more hours of each day on activities related to the military. Story 56. The last time you see your friends, everyone eventually goes away and lives their life. Sometimes people change and become unrecognizable. I am at the point where I forget some of the names of people I served with, not direct friends but people I would see every day. It makes me kind of sad. Story 57. This was hard to explain at first, but I did not realize until I left the service how significant shared formative experiences can be, and many people do not have that. Maybe the easiest way to explain is my example. I was a United States Marine, enlisted and then commissioned as an officer. I deployed to Iraq in 2003 for the invasion in a combat role, then again in 2004 on civil affairs, then left the service and went to graduate school on the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, commonly known as the GI Bill. I did not literally or consciously believe what I am about to describe, but I kept catching it as a gut assumption. On some level, I assumed every man I met at college had been in the military and deployed to war. It was as if we had all just finished World War II, when about 32% of men served. So if I was talking to a 23-year-old graduate student named Tony about something covered in class that day, part of me actually assumed I could ask him, "Who did you serve with? What military occupational specialty did you have? Where did you deploy?" And without missing a beat, he would say, "I was a Navy Construction Battalion welder, did Haiti in 2002, and spent most of 2004 welding scrap metal onto convoy trucks near Basra in Iraq." Clearly that was unlikely, so I would catch myself in that assumption and shake it off. For most of my adult life up to that point, the vast majority of new people I met were in the military. I then spent several years in a Marine Corps artillery battalion, which at the time was all male. Almost everyone I knew in my unit had been in Iraq or Afghanistan, many multiple times. A large share had at least a combat action ribbon. 5 to 10% of my unit had a Purple Heart. Everyone knew someone who had died in the war. I emphasize that even then this was not representative of the overall military at the time, but it was everyone around me, and I internalized it so strongly that it became a default fact of life. It took me about a year to shake that assumption off after I left the service. Story 58. Travel gives me a great deal of perspective. I meet people of many races, ages, cultures, and languages and often find common ground. I also see both the beauty and the ugliness of the world. After that, I find it frustrating to return to the United States and hear people who have never left the country claim they understand the world better than I do, when their perspectives are rooted in ignorance. Story 59. The United States military is a form of socialism that largely works. Service members receive basic training and an assigned job. They are provided housing or additional pay to rent, receive free healthcare, and enjoy other benefits. Story 60. The Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs are two separate agencies that do not coordinate and have different databases and systems. Please go to sick call or medical even if people tease you about it. Insist that military medical staff schedule appropriate follow-up if they do not see you or do not make the correct appointments. Save copies of all records. When submitting a Department of Veterans Affairs claim, they may deny service connection if the Department of Defense did not document the issue while you were in service. I went to sick call several times, but most of the time military medical staff did not upload the information to my medical record. People criticize the Veterans Benefits Administration, but if military staff do not document treatment while you are in service, the Veterans Benefits Administration has no proof anything happened and may assume the claim is not legitimate. Story 61. I joined the Corps in 1977. It was the best decision I ever made. I retired after 23 years, earned a college degree, and later retired from the United States Postal Service after 17 years. I was very driven and gave 100% in everything I did. I have been married for 44 years and have 3 college-educated children who make more money than I ever imagined. I must have made a good impression on them. Story 62. I knew about the benefits beforehand, but it later dawned on me how the basic incentives for joining the military are the things everyday Americans have been asking for years. We have socialism in this country, but it is reserved as a bargaining chip for young people to fight in our wars. When I talk with someone who believes socialism is evil, I now ask whether they think our troops deserve the very best we have to offer. If they say yes, I point out that what the troops receive are the same benefits now labeled as socialist. So why cannot we all have the best? Free healthcare for all, paid college tuition, a universal basic income in the form of food and housing allowances, and so on. Story 63. Military grade usually means poor quality and high cost. Story 64. The one thing I did not realize was that doing a short 4-year active duty contract would set me up with a very good career for the rest of my life. I work for the government and have had the chance to live in Germany, New York City, and Tokyo, Japan. I receive a comfortable low 6-figure salary for an office job that is not very difficult. For a lazy person like me, I am very happy with how everything turned out. Story 65. You will create relationships that are stronger than family. Being placed with many strangers strengthens your ability to collaborate with and appreciate the differences of others. You develop thick skin when times are tough. As long as you are willing to work hard for the sake of the team, when things go wrong in your personal life, someone will always have your back. Structure will creep into your everyday life, such as being prepared and being on time. Early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable. After retiring from the military 5 years ago and working a corporate job, I can safely say that none of my civilian coworkers had any of these attributes. My first period of service was from 1988 until 1991, and I did not pursue a military career at that time. It was after Operation Desert Storm, and most people involved just wanted to get away from the military. After I returned in 1998 and retired in 2020, the benefits of prior service cannot be matched by any other profession. Story 66. Civilian life is not nearly as exciting as military life. Story 67. I had become conditioned to being cursed at by supervisors and superiors. I still carry it to this day. Whenever I make a mistake, I don't think of it that way. I hear that clear-as-day voice saying, "You fucked up." If I don't do something perfectly the first time, I need to get my shit together. The second job I had after leaving the army was with another veteran as my supervisor. He cursed me out, barked orders, and said things that got under my skin. I had forgotten this was completely unacceptable except in the army, and even then it was unacceptable. I only realized this was not normal when my friends and I were talking about bad bosses, and I got that what the fuck look when I casually explained my view of a bad boss. I remember, while serving, bear crawling on rocks and gravel until my hands bled, and it never occurred to me that no one should have that much authority over me. Story 68. I retired after 36 years in the army and felt completely institutionalized. The biggest change was managing routine medical appointments. I had never done that on my own. I only went to the doctor or dentist when I was told to or when I was sick. I got a flu shot and dental cleaning when required. Because I spent my last 7 years working in the Pentagon, I walked to appointments instead of driving to them. I knew in theory that civilians paid a lot for healthcare, but I did not appreciate it until I had to fill out healthcare elections for my first post-retirement job. I just completed my 2026 elections during my company's open enrollment, and matching my military health benefits would cost well over $1,000 per pay period. That is insane. My out-of-pocket costs for the military healthcare program are capped at roughly $3,600 a year. Story 69. Does anyone else feel like AskReddit has become a place for bots to solicit personally identifiable information nowadays? Hey Redditors, what is your favorite movie from the year you were born? Who is the most famous person from your hometown? If you named your dog after your password, what would your dog's name be? Story 70. The military teaches you to work with all sorts of people because it uses group punishment. Unless you want to watch your world burn, you learn to get along and thrive. Otherwise, your enlistment becomes pure misery. Story 71. I joined the Navy to get money for college. Once I finished my enlistment, I could not get out of there fast enough. In retrospect, I wish I had stayed in. I could have retired at 40, received a regular check, and started a second career. Story 72. Many veterans say they did not realize how much they would miss the structure, built-in community, and clear purpose. They also did not realize how challenging the transition to civilian life can be. Story 73. I was sold socialism to defend capitalism abroad. I was pretty right-wing going in, but the longer I stayed, the more I learned. I just kind of woke up. It was literally an "are we the baddies" moment. Story 74. How much therapy would I need to feel like a normal person again? I am not joking. Iraq War, 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Battalion, 12th Cavalry Regiment, 2006 to 2007. Story 75. The low pay and all the nonsense about my benefits were not worth much. I left 10 years ago and am much happier now. I make more money, have good health care, and plenty of free time to relax or be with my family. I no longer have to live in substandard military housing or in a tent in the middle of nowhere, and no one orders me around. Civilian life is great. Story 76. All the soft skills you learn while in the military, conflict resolution, time management, and punctuality, really do pay off. The number of people outside who lack these skills is much higher than I expected. It made it easy for me to stand out when I was in my undergraduate studies. How much of your authentic self is suppressed when you are in the military? I had a good cry the day after I got out. I was ready to move on. But it was hard leaving behind something that had been a huge part of my life from the time I graduated high school until I was 30. Then I got to dye my hair blue and purple and wear glittery nail polish. I deleted Facebook and lost touch with a lot of people. I stopped talking to many friends I had out of convenience or proximity whose worldviews were in direct conflict with my own. Many, not surprisingly, were quite conservative, and I always felt like I had to look past our differences since they outnumbered me. I left during the coronavirus pandemic around the time George Floyd was murdered. For a moment, it felt like the world was waking up, and I made a choice to be on the right side of history. I got a crash course in when people show you who they are, believe them. I have never ghosted so many people so quickly in my life. Military social norms often conflict with civilian norms. For example, profanity and frat house humor are common, while being late or not giving 110% is unacceptable. I learned that the inverse is true in most office and corporate settings. A few years after I got out, I found myself in middle management and was told to frame tasks to employees as, "Could you please do me this huge favor?" and to smile. In the military, if a superior asks you to do something, it is a direct order. You either do it or get yelled at. I had to relearn how to socialize in a way that is palatable in the civilian world. I often nod and smile while feeling a million miles away. I cannot sit with my back to a door, and I always scan a room for potential escape routes. Story 77. The United States of America is less racist than any other country I have visited. I have visited dozens of countries. Story 78. It's all a joke and nothing matters. Friends of mine were blown up by the people from whom Trump just received multi-billion-dollar bribes. They are very good at making the troops drink the Kool-Aid. Story 79. For all our moralizing, if it's more cost-effective to let someone die slowly and painfully than to be decent, leadership will let it happen. Enemy, ally, or our own, it did not matter. We let people burn to death or bleed out slowly because command would not allow us to put them out of their misery. I watched a lot of people burn slowly because leadership did not want to waste money expending ammunition on them, even as we were trying to get rid of nearly out-of-date stock so we could cycle in new systems, moving from the AGM-114P2A Hellfire missile to the AGM-114R Hellfire missile. I watched a British Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter pilot burn to death in northeastern Afghanistan over the course of approximately 5 to 10 minutes after the helicopter was hit in the tail by a rocket-propelled grenade and spun in, where no recovery was possible, because we were prohibited from giving him a quick death. We were the only nearby asset, an MQ-9 Reaper unmanned aerial vehicle, so we were tasked with cordoning off the area and providing fire support. The crew complement in the back died on impact. The co-pilot survived but was pinned into the cockpit, likely with broken legs. Fire moved from the tail to the cockpit as we watched him struggle with his harness. We requested permission to strike the helicopter so he would not have to die slowly. We were ordered to wait for the quick reaction force, despite the fact they could not traverse the terrain without helicopters, which could not operate in the area because of small arms fire. An hour or two later, after the wreckage cooled, we were told the quick reaction force was not coming and to destroy the site to prevent anyone from recovering classified materials. I had to push hard to get an explanation, and it had to come through a back channel. If I had not known our joint terminal attack controller personally, I would have been left with no answers. I never even got the crew members' names. Meanwhile, leadership was happy to spend vast sums on trivial items for the unit, like chairs made by Ferrari, which broke within months, and backlit mechanical gaming keyboards for every desk, because we had to spend that budget or we would not receive more funding next year. We would spend millions building Burger King and Subway restaurants in the desert, or buying more tanks we did not need or want but not to give a man an honorable death. Had I been in his position, I would have wanted the airstrike and expected my allies to do the right thing. I still regret that we did not follow orders and simply do it anyway. I feel a court-martial would have been easier to live with than this memory. This was just one incident among many over my time. While I have managed to accept that I was not at fault through years of therapy, I have never truly gotten over it. It and others like it eroded my faith in the United States. Story 80. That I was a shark among sharks. I think they called it a brotherhood to keep us from eating each other. Story 81. You realize how much teamwork shaped you, not just in missions but in friendships. Civilians just do not understand that level of trust. Story 82. How much intestinal fortitude helps when the shit hits the fan in the real world. Story 83. So much healthcare is effectively inaccessible for many Americans. My wife kept me on her plan, so I now have health coverage through her. Every time I get a new job and read the health plan details, I wonder how anyone can afford the premiums and still make ends meet when so little is covered and there is an annual deductible. Story 84. You are taught many things, but how to be a functional adult on the outside is not one of them. Having to learn what a health savings account was and how to choose my benefits package at age 28 earned me some odd looks from human resources. Story 85. I was writing checks with my body that I cannot afford anymore. I am in my mid-30s and deeply broken. Story 86. I learned to eat completely differently than I used to. Now I eat one item at a time, in an orderly fashion. Previously, it was organized chaos. Story 87. How much of my enlistment was just me being a sucker for marketing and propaganda in Hollywood movies? I actually liked movies like Zero Dark 30 and American Sniper when they came out. It makes me question my judgment to this day. Story 88. Speak clearly about the benefits. Use them. You earn them. Story 89. Many people talk about missing the structure but not the stress. Story 90. Army nonsense is not that bad compared with civilian nonsense, especially in a corporate job. I have been out of the Army for decades, but I have to say it remains the second best run organization I have been part of. I have been in many different organizations. Story 91. You never realize how much you take discipline for granted until it's gone. Story 92. Anyone can receive lifetime disability benefits. People repeatedly ask if anything is wrong and suggest what might be bothering you mentally. No one talks about it. Story 93. People in responsible positions could lie to your face with no consequences. Story 94. I am a 26-year active duty veteran. I am more than happy to be out, but here are some things I noticed. These are not absolute and there are plenty of exceptions. Remember that the military is just a microcosm of the society it comes from. I used to think the military was inefficient. Then I went to work in the civilian world and found we were highly efficient and effective by comparison. Civilians do not look out for each other in the same way the military does. Teamwork is much less common in the civilian world, and no one really cares about you outside of work. Communication is better in the military. People in the military are generally more responsible and less lazy. This is not always true. It is more of an overall trend. There is a sense of sacrifice for the greater good that is often absent in civilian life. People in civilian workplaces will take advantage of you for this. In the active duty military, there is no separation between work and home life. You are on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is no overtime pay in the military, and the system takes full advantage of that. Story 95. I heard a comedian say that the problem with the military is that it is cheaper to worship our troops than it is to take care of them, which is probably why things are the way they are. Story 96. 1. We did not fight. 2. I was a pawn. 3. It was not for freedom. 4. It was for the power and money of the wealthy. 5. The corruption is so deep I cannot even fathom its true complexity. 6. Life and limb are lost and we are labeled heroes. In reality, we are human pawns. 7. America has not won a war since, debatably, World War II. I question whether we were on the correct side. While we were overseas, an invasion much worse was happening in our homeland. Story 97. Basically, no country that we have invaded and terrorized since World War II has ever deserved to be invaded, and by every definition, the American military is the biggest terrorist organization in the world. Story 98. As a disabled veteran, I want everyone to have access to what I have. Story 99. Military members have no idea what being a veteran is like. Story 100. A drunk asshole in town can turn out to be a commanding officer, and they know you want to swing at them. Quietly, they want you to do it. Story 101. I did not realize how much I had changed for the better until I left after 10 years. It was a total grind. I was exhausted and my body hurt. Thankfully, I went to many medical appointments. I could have had a better attitude, and it would have been easier. Not drinking would have helped too, but that was kind of the culture. I fought every step of the way and every promotion. Strangely, I am much healthier mentally and physically now. I do not drink or smoke, and I sleep well with my continuous positive airway pressure machine. Took me a while to get used to every day being the same, but I am grateful now. My mental health and optimism have improved, and I see my son every day. Story 102. Go to the doctor for every health concern. Whether it is a headache or depression, document everything. Documentation makes obtaining disability benefits much easier. Story 103. I didn't realize how much I would miss the people I served with, the sense of mission and purpose, and being respected as a subject matter expert. Now I'm just some random guy at work. Story 104. That, in comparison to the real world, was much easier and required less work. Story 105. Isolation and loneliness occur when service members lose the tight-knit military community and immediate support network, leading to feelings of disconnection. Story 106. How small the world is. I have a specialized military occupational specialty. When I am in the dining facility in a remote part of Kuwait, I run into a classmate who is stopping at the military installation for a night between returning from Iraq and flying back to the United States. Story 107. If you fail only one time out of 100, the people who do not like you will remember only that one failure. Story 108. The military teaches you to rely on structure. Everything has a process, a form, and a chain of command. That sounds neat in theory, but when you leave, the world is chaotic. There are no clear orders and no checklist for every little thing, and it hits hard. Story 109. I made great lifelong friends, but I was sometimes under the command of absolute idiots and mentally deficient people who should not have held those positions. Story 110. You cannot overstate how close you become with the people you serve alongside. It was amazing to work with people from all walks of life in foreign countries, doing extraordinary things with very poor equipment and somehow getting the job done. It is a completely different experience compared with interacting with civilians, and working outside the service is much easier. From my experience, most of the veterans who complain about their time in the service are the ones who did not get along or were out for themselves. Story 111. In civilian life, you will hear people say they do not socialize with their coworkers. In the military, coworkers are usually the people you primarily socialize with. Story 112. I am still in, but my friends who live across the world have experiences that few can match. Story 113. We kept our political beliefs and affiliations to ourselves. I served in the United States Navy from 1977 to 2002. Times may have changed. We did not discuss politics and counseled subordinates not to either. I had no way of knowing the politics of those above me during a change of command. Life after the military seems strange to me. Story 114. Same here. It's turned into retirements, promotions, and sadly death updates in my chat group. Story 115. Little of what I did in the military relates to civilian life, and nothing I did made life better for anyone. Story 116. The civilian workplace lacks structure and discipline. Story 117. My team and I fought hard for significant changes in safety, equipment accountability, maintenance, training, ammunition handling, and other areas. I saw much of it revert as people who cared about doing things the right way left one by one. It was frustrating. I did not realize until after I left the military that having any institutional influence as a junior leader, even temporarily, is rare outside the military. I was able to convince senior leaders to change procedures across our entire brigade by researching the subjects, making informed recommendations, getting experienced soldiers to support me, and proving the value of the changes with results. The changes may not have lasted forever, but they helped for a few years. The equivalent would be a manager of a single store changing how all the stores in an entire region operate. Not that it cannot happen, but my unit had real influence because we were very good at our jobs. Half the time that meant we were called on to pick up the slack for other units because they could not handle it. The competence tax was real. Story 118. In a normal job, you must account for your time and work 40 hours per week. It depends on how close you are to the soldiers in your unit and how involved their families are. Story 119. It is striking how we think, handle issues, and go about our daily business. I am constantly shocked by how the civilian world continues while drowning in chaos. Story 120. When my father was discharged in 1966, he learned that he should not have been sent to Vietnam because he was not an American citizen. He became a naturalized citizen in 1982, by the way. Draftees who were not citizens were exempt from combat. He had already completed a 13-month tour and returned safely, so it was water under the bridge. Story 121. A large portion of leadership is extremely useless. The best leaders I ever had were in the Army, and the worst were also in the Army. Story 122. I thought senior leadership was lacking when I was in the military. Then I worked for corporate America, which was a real cold shower. Army leadership was far better than corporate leadership. I was a captain in the United States Army and interacted with senior officers. As a civilian, I led teams and interacted with chief technology officers and chief operating officers. Story 123. How many people are clueless about what the military is like, especially on a day-to-day basis? Story 124. In short, the vast majority of people in the Marine Corps are the most hateful, backstabbing, and intentionally malicious people I've ever met. A significant number are also plainly dumb and incompetent. There is no such thing as a brotherhood. Whether someone has slightly more time in service, a higher rank, or a higher billet, if they can find a way to have power over you, they will do whatever they can to make your life worse. I have never seen a group hate another group more than a Marine hates a Marine of lesser rank. Far too many Marines seem to make it their life's mission to make everyone else's life worse. Their only enjoyment appears to come from hurting those under them. There is almost no good leadership in the military. Over 5 years, 3 different units, and multiple off-base trainings, I had only 2, maybe 3 legitimately good leaders at any rank. The rest were either incompetent or believed, verbatim, being a good leader means being an asshole. For example, one woman told her squad leader that her shoulders hurt when bench pressing and asked not to do the bench press portion of physical training. The squad leader said she would be written up if she did not do it. She went to bench press, dislocated both shoulders, and had to be medically separated. Junior leadership blamed her, called her a shitbag, and did not change anything to prevent it from happening again. These are legitimately the worst people I've ever met. Being a straight white male in the Marine Corps, I have heard what these people truly think behind closed doors when they assume everyone in the room agrees with them. The beliefs ranged from Jews are evil, black people are dumb and violent, We should set up machine guns on the border and execute every Mexican. Native Americans deserve to be genocide. To women don't deserve rights, and we should repeal the 19th Amendment. And gay and trans people are evil and should be killed. They were not just bigots. They looked down on the few who were not. I have seen support for the Confederacy, support for the Nazis, and people siding with Russia over Ukraine. Some were so bigoted they would rather side with enemies of our country. A couple of people even took pride in saying, "We are definitely not the good guys." All anyone thinks about when promoted is the ways they can haze those under them. Every time someone who was hazed and saw it was pointless will, upon promotion, instantly start hazing even friends they were close to before. I was removed from billets for refusing to haze the Marines under me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.